Welcome to another edition of the Mailbag from the workshop this time, and we've got a fair few comments to get through. But before we get through those today, normal parish notices. So, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not? Hit the subscribe icon. If you want to be notified when this sort of content or other content hits the channel, that's the bell icon is the one you should be hitting. If you like the content of this video or any other video you watch on the channel, give it a thumbs up. It really helps. Become a member of the TMTG community. The address is down there, as are the Instagram and Facebook pages, or Instagram and Facebook pages, whichever way around it is. Go over there. You'll see all the shenanigans of the channel are notified on those platforms. But now back to the video. And this question comes from Alfred Dawson in response to Drum Machine Wars, a video I did in October 2020. And Alfred writes, still waiting for the remake of the Oberheim DMX by Behringer, or an Oberheim. I also think Novation and Modal Electronics should compete and release analog drum machines. Funny enough, I've just done another question where I mentioned the Oberheim DMX. So, I mean, the first thing goes out to everybody who watches this channel, right? Oberheim, Behringer have put out on social media that the guys in the Behringer Skunk Works have just finished work on the last synthesizer, or the synthesizer they're just about to launch. That is not the 2600. It's their reimagination of the Oberheim XA. Anyway, what they've said is they've just come to the end of that particular piece of work, and they were looking around at what should be the next project into the Behringer Skunk Works. And what I would say is, if you guys out there have a requirement for a synthesizer, now I suspect a lot of people have said the Jupiter 8. A number of people have probably said a 6 and a 4. So, they've probably been asked for. But think about anything else. So, me, I sort of sent them a thing on social media saying about a Lindrum. I'd love to see them do a Lindrum to complement the drum machine fetish that I seem to be acquiring. But I suppose what they're looking for at the moment is to see what sort of interest there is in the demand curve for some of these things. And bearing in mind, that Behringer are pumping these things out at a cost point that does not break the bank. It's a they're putting out a lot of units, and you can pick these units up for between $500 and $1,000, I suppose, depending on what it is they're launching. I mean, the 2600 they just launched, I think the launch price was about $450. So, it's good value for money if they can get it right. So why wouldn't we ask for a Lindrum or an OBXA or one of the other legendary boxes that are now far too expensive for us mere mortals to buy? And this one comes from Migraine Gain. And this was in response to the Pragmatist or Purist video I did in October 2020. And this was all about the sort of reimagining of clones, not Star Wars clones, music equipment clones or reimaginations. And Migraine writes, Behringer saw a potential for a fully gas-driven audience and went in deep. Pretty much everyone and their cousin or soon will have one of their new Burby reboxes. I have legacy rolling gear, TB3, TR606, 707, 808, and lots of keyboards. But the new gear is so close, it's pointless wearing out my old gears 99% of the time. Even my beloved Yamaha FM gear takes a backseat to the Modi X these days. The majority of the initial resistance seems to come from collectors, concerned that it would lower the price of the originals, but that really hasn't happened. If anything, it's opposite. I'm having to move house to fit in all the new SHIT Behringer are bringing out. Smiley face. Well, honestly, I'm with you on the fact that we're probably going to have to move houses. As you guys know, I live with the housemates and they are very accommodating as long as I play fair, which means that I can only have so much equipment lying here at any point in time. And I have a storage unit that's full of other bits of equipment. So at the moment I have the Oasis, I have the Behringer drum machine, I have sitting over there, I have the EPS 16 and the SY77, which hasn't been really showcased on the channel at the moment because I haven't got around to doing the disk drive upgrade on the SY77 because it needs a new disk drive. Anyway, but I am in agreement that Behringer is bringing out some really cracking stuff, and the question is, can my bank balance sustain it? Well, I'm poor anyway. I've just gone through a divorce. What do you expect? I'm penniless. I really am penniless. Yes, but I'm happy. That's the important thing. I've got rid of my ex, and I am absolutely ecstatic about that. I'm just penniless. But you're right, Behringer saw the market gap. They really did see the market gap and identify the pulse point, identify what equipment needed to be driven into that pulse point, and plug the gap. I mean, they have seemed to have got it right. And rather than other manufacturers, what Behringer have done, which is what I quite like about the Behringer stuff. It sounds like I'm talking about the Behringer stuff quite a lot on the channel at the moment, but what I like about the Behringer stuff is they don't just clone it. They are reimagining it. They are making the clone better than the original. Now, some people out there may scream at the video saying, "You're talking utter toss, John." Am I? Am I talking utter tosh? So, when you get a new piece of Behringer equipment, it will have a way of storing, a way of recalling, a way of changing, a way of manipulating, and possibly some new functions that didn't exist on the original that should have existed. So is that better? Is that worse? Or is that, or are the purists jumping in? I don't know. Now, apart from the fact I do love playing legacy machines, and if I was involved more in commercial activity, i.e. the gigging side of it, I probably would sit squarely where my grain is, in that I would buy the clones without a thought of anything else, and I would use them exclusively because they're likely not to break down on me. When you are gigging, or you're running a dedicated studio and you've got paying clients coming in and out, you know what, this stuff has to work, and it has to continuously work because that's how you make it pay. You make it pay by having it work. So if you're a gigging musician, night in, night out, that keyboard goes on the stand, that drum machine goes on the stand, that piece of equipment goes on the stand, you press the on button, you press play, and away you go. It has to work. And you assume that the internals of the new stuff is built to a reasonable standard. But even if it's not, I mean, given the price point of the Behringer stuff, you could afford to have two. If you were doing this commercially, and I'm not, this is a hobby, but if you were doing this commercially, you know what? You'd buy two. You put one in the box, in the car, in the van, on the truck, and if the first one went piff, you get the second one out, load in the SD card, and away you go. How many minutes would that take? Not many. Now, last year I went to see one of the Genesis tribute bands, and it's really annoying me because I was going to say it's G2 Genesis, and I'm not sure it was G2 Genesis. But I went and saw one of the Genesis tribute bands, and the guy plays an original Hammond. Because a lot of the original Genesis stuff was done on a Hammond. I mean, that was Tony Banks's go-to keyboard for many years. So he had an original Hammond, and this thing went poof on the stage. And then you had the guy, the band, sort of, playing on with the technician underneath the sort of, back off the keyboard, underneath there with a screwdriver, trying to make this thing work. Now, his problem was, of course, he didn't have a spare Hammond organ. I mean, there are fairly beefy type things to move around anyway, but he didn't have a spare. And he was lucky that he managed to he had a keyboard sitting next to him, which was a fairly modern keyboard, and he had the sounds loaded on the keyboard. So he wasn't playing the original Hammond that he would have played, but the other keyboard supplemented it. Again, it's like, how do you get, what's your spare? What's your backup plan? With the clones or the reimagined keyboards, why wouldn't you buy a second one?